Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Tabitha Ziegler. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. It has been a minute because I have been campaigning, and I want to introduce you to my friend and producer, Ted Craig. Hello. My Canadian friend, which is important. Right. And I wanted to do a after the campaign chat / interview conversation with someone that has an outside perspective that can bring something of value to the American listeners. So, Ted, take it away, my friend.
Sure. Well, let me add to that then, because I've been in the privileged position of putting your podcast together, and therefore being able to listen to all of your episodes, of course, your wonderful interviews with amazing people. And we have a team that's helping to put this together. I mean, I do kind of the production side, the editing, the video side, and then we have Amanda Groney, who writes the episode descriptions and does some of the extra research, and then her husband Zach does our graphics as well. So it's a fun team. And yeah, we're all in this privileged position of being able to witness what you've been up to for the past year, but especially the last few months with this campaign. So it occurred to me now that the campaign's over, the primary was last week, and I'm curious, just as a listener, as a friend, to know how it went. What was the experience like? You know, what did you learn? What kind of people did you meet? What kind of feedback did you get? And of course, well, where does it go from here? And yes, you didn't win, but you came a very good second. And I think that was a really, really impressive result because, you know, you came in out of nowhere, and to finish second, and I know you made a good impression. So we're going to learn all about it here today. And I'm basically playing the role of the interviewer, the interlocutor who will ask you the questions and kind of be there on behalf of the audience to learn all about it. So how are you feeling about it?
I actually feel proud, because I ran my campaign in a very different way. Coming in late and running all my own stuff, like I was running the campaign, the social media. I was the sole financial backer of this thing. And the fact that I'm not a politician and I'm a regular person gave me a very interesting perspective. And like I do with a lot of other things, I was building the plane as I was flying it, which was interesting. And of course, you know, I made mistakes. I think there were some things that I did well. I worked within... I am literally the person that I was speaking to, right? Like whenever I would speak about things like universal health care, autism and disability rights, the non-existent support structure we have in this country, universal child care, like these are things I was speaking from experience on because these are struggles that I have. So it was easier for me to relate to people that way because, you know, I ran my campaign like this. I was like, right, what would I like to see from a candidate? What do I want them to say? And then I just did those things. I probably didn't always get it right, but I think I was very successful at least being very authentic, very truthful, and pushing the bar, which I think we desperately need right now. And I will add, I participated in a candidate program that was pretty cool. It's the Progressive Candidate Program run by Jen Johansson. So a little shout out to all you guys. There's about 100 and 110 candidates. They're all progressive. Yeah, across the country. Huh. So you've got a group of these people behind the scenes acknowledging what is going on in this country and trying to build these people up and give them access, because most of us are just normal people running our campaigns. Maybe we have a small team. Maybe it's just us. Maybe there's a larger campaign. But the through line was very progressive policies, right? Like almost every single one of us was speaking on universal health care or Medicaid for all. Like all of these types of stances were pretty much streamlined across the board. And it was really interesting to see that group develop. Like I said, you know, I came in kind of late. Some of these people have been running their campaigns for like a year and a half, like Jackson Franklin, for example. But it was cool to be a part of something like that. It really felt like a movement. So I'm very appreciative to all of those people. They were very supportive. And so I feel like now part of my job is to push them forward, to invest in progressive candidates and to invest in the youth of the generation who need to be the progressive candidates moving forward. Like we have to invest in these young people to make a structural change that we want to see in this nation.
Mm-hmm. Well, what kind of feedback did you get on the campaign trail with the message that you had, you know, in that sense of speaking to yourself as your kind of ideal candidate? How do people respond to that message? I mean, did it resonate?
I think so. You know, and I will say this, you know, I struggled with childcare the whole way through.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
It was a shit show, man. Like, it was a total shit show. But it kind of made me have a refreshed perspective, right? Because I'm like, I don't know if I'm the only one out here doing this, but I sure as shit am one of the, like, most extreme examples of our lack in any sort of structural childcare, right? Because especially from a single mother and a like disability parent perspective, nobody was watching my kids. My parents couldn't do it all the time. But I successfully made it to, I'd say, 7 or 8 different events that I was invited to. And one thing that I'm really proud of is I think every event that I was invited to, with the exception of one, I was able to attend. And the only reason I wasn't able to attend the one was because I had like unforeseen circumstances, which happens sometimes. But I was hitting it hard on social media because I found out pretty early on. I was like, right. If I can't do this the traditional way, I have to play to my strengths. And because I already had a podcast, because I knew friends that had podcasts and things of that nature, I was like, right, that's my leverage point. And also, most people in the States right now, they're working 2-3 jobs. I mean, most normal people that were working class and working age were not able to attend a lot of these events. Like they just weren't able to. So then the next best thing to that is bring yourself, like bring your voice to the listener. So what better way to do that than through podcasts?
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. Everything's, the economy is like structured more on demand these days, which is a good thing in a sense, but also it's kind of forced to do that because people are so busy and have to have 2 or 3 jobs and all this crap. So the only way that they can participate and learn things and be exposed to candidates in this case is stuff like podcasts, right? It's a great way to do it. Of course, you got to get the word out there.
Yeah.
So, did you feel like you made, I guess, a connection with maybe enough voters? Do you feel like you resonated, you know, with people that you actually met?
I think so. And I built some pretty good alliances. I think I was a little unique that way, right? Like most people are out here for themselves. And I definitely was not that way. And I think it gave an opportunity to people to think outside the box that way. Because I was like, right, this is a team sport. Like we need as many progressives as we can to be in those seats. So then it makes good sense for us to work together, right? Like, and I would say even in my race, nobody was really that nasty. They really weren't. Like, we weren't trying to do that kind of thing. There were probably a few bumps along the road, but I will say this. I don't necessarily think it was the candidates. I think it was the party. That is my opinion. Because the Democratic Party, especially in Indiana, they didn't like these progressive candidates. No. In my opinion, is this. I'm not saying people have to share it, but now that I have been in there and seen how the sausage is made, if you will, as one of my really good friends says, to see the inner workings of that machine and to see how people want it done is different than what the base wants. So like when people want change and they want authentic people and authenticity in general, and then the party comes back and by and large, either just sends all their support one direction, which tended to be a bit more safe, right? Like most of these candidates that they would pick to endorse were very safe candidates, very like, we're not going to say, we're not going to say genocide or trans rights sort of people, right? We're going to just stay in our lane that way and not make anybody upset. So anybody that was making someone upset or causing waves, especially if they said they were a progressive or like a democratic socialist or a socialist or what have you, they were getting a lot of heat. But I also feel like from the conversations that I had with just normal voters, myself included, that's where the base is at, though. Like normal people across the board. Yeah, we're having these conversations of like, you know what? Like, we see how they're doing things in Canada or Mexico or Europe or whatever, and why can't we have that? Yeah. And then whenever the Iran war started, right, we're like, so you guys can spend $1 billion to $2 billion a day, and you're still going to tell us we can't have universal health care. Like, interesting.
It's amazing, the hypocrisy. It boggles me every day. That's a whole other story. But
I know.
Yeah, what also boggles me is that Indiana, I think, is a good example that why is the Democratic Party establishment so rigid and stubborn with how they want to do things when, from what I can tell, they haven't had a lot of success for a while. And so are they really trying to win, whether that's House or Senate, I guess, or state seats? I don't know exactly the numbers, but I know they haven't really won much and they haven't been in control for a while. Are they really trying to win, or do they have some other agenda, or maybe it's their own just personal, they've got jobs or stability or whatever it is, but are they really trying to win? Because I think the people who are really trying to win are people like yourselves who are reflecting the grassroots, who want change, for God's sake. So it's not happening from the Democratic establishment. How is that going to change then? Do you have to get people in there, of course, to change that leadership, at least at the state level?
Well, I think there are a lot of people that are out of touch. And not that there's a simple answer to that, but for me, I made some notes on this. So I think this is a good point to share it. Let's go here. So, not just the Democratic Party, across the board. This is sort of the American perspective, and I've heard this from many, many different people. And a good friend of mine and I were having a conversation about this recently. So your three main issues that everyone across the political spectrum, like whether you consider yourself a socialist, a progressive, even into MAGA, surprisingly, like I've seen chats like this too. The three main trigger points that all Americans can get behind are genocide and foreign wars, money in politics, and the Epstein files. And the Democratic Party in particular could be making a layup right now. If that was their platform, right? Like if they were clear on that language, if their goal is to pull voters that were not voting, felt disenfranchised, even, some people are making the argument, pull some of the Republican voters or whatever, because they're, unhappy right now. I think that's not a successful strategy to not be clear. And so the language has to be very clear and concise. You have to have candidates that will, stand on their belief system 10 toes down. I think the base right now, overwhelmingly, is screaming, hey, we were sold a lie, basically, right? Like we thought, like growing up, like for me, for example, I've been a Democrat since I was 18 years old because I considered myself a humanist and I was gay and I was like other, right? So I'm like, well, I can't be a Republican, even though my parents are Republicans, even though most of the people in my area are Republicans, because I don't believe in those sets of core values. And some people would disagree with me on that. I'm sure there are some Republicans that would say, no, I am actually humanitarian. I just don't see that reflected in the Republican Party. And that's an argument for a different time. But that is why I always self-identified as a Democrat, because I thought the Democrats were supposed to be the people that were for the working class, that were for unions, that were for, all of the other things like the LGBTQ plus community, women's rights, reproductive rights. I thought that was our camp. And along the way, it seems it has become not so clear where we stand on issues like that. And in this giant tent that we've got right now, the progressives, the leftists, however you want to put it, the democratic socialists, whatever, we are the ones calling for change. We also believe that you absolutely have to get money out of politics to make any change whatsoever. And we are also seeing that reflected in other parties. Like, I have heard that from libertarians, Republicans. Everybody that's working class right now sees it very clearly, and they're like, listen, the problem, the root you need to pluck, if you will, to make change is that money. Because everybody that's normal, that's actually like paying close enough attention, can see, look, they're all bought and paid for. It's basically a uniparty at this point. You can't go into Congress as a civil servant, for example, and then come out a millionaire. And that's the same whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, right? Like, if you go in to enrich yourself and spend your time, then who are you beholden to? Well, you're beholden to the corporations. So at this point, right, like, our government is essentially controlled by APAC, lobby groups, corporate interest groups, because they have bought our politicians. And so if you speak to any American on the street that's paying attention, right, they will tell you that. They'll be like, listen, like, they're all dirty. They all need to go. So the progress that Americans are screaming for is deafening, because all of the things that we're asking for, we keep being told we can't have that, or we're asking too much. And the progressives roll in here like the redheaded stepchildren, and we're like, hey, how about we just ask for what we want? And if you're going to negotiate, right, like, ask for the farthest thing that you want. That's why on my platform, I was like, right, we should have $35 an hour as a minimum wage. And it would literally suck the air out of the room. People were like, what did she just say? And I'm like, listen, you know what? If we had kept up with the rate that we did in like the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, inflation.
Right? Like, we would presently be at a $24 per hour minimum wage. And the only reason that we're not is because the corporations and because of the greed. So we've got like an exploding situation with CEOs and all these interest groups that keep us poor, uneducated, like,
there's so much wealth out there. It's insane.
And it's spreading, right? But because the U.S. is always, for whatever reason, sort of like the epicenter of the shit sandwich that is corporations and the world. It's true. It's true. It's like they want to experiment on the American people. I'm not saying that they don't experiment elsewhere, right? There's plenty of exploitation to be had. But we have these corporations here, right? That they won't tell the American people, right? Like, when we buy our iPhone and when they tell us, you need this thing that costs $1,000 and we're going to make sure that it's outdated, so you have to buy one every 2 or 3 years or whatever, just to do the things that you need to do. Yeah. They don't tell you that, oh, and by the way, like, we have little kids in the Congo that are mining that shit with their hands. So there's this constant, I mean, it's just anti-humanitarian on a lot of levels, right? But you have things like that, right, that American citizens have been propagandized to not know. And it is always for profit. So when you have these people like myself come in here, run a campaign on their own money on principle, because I'm trying to set a standard for younger people who might be interested in politics, right? And say, hey, what would it look like if a bunch of us did this? What would it look like if we had a more egalitarian system like France does, for example, where if we have 5 or 6 candidates, everybody gets free airtime. If we suck that money out of politics, what would happen if we actually got representation that looked like us, spoke like us, and had the same agenda as us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's amazing, yeah. It's such a simple concept. It's like the essence of democracy, and yet it feels so foreign these days because you don't get, I guess, many candidates who are willing to say those things. So have you come across then more candidates, at least, who are trying to be bold, say those things, make those statements, you know, and that could be across the country again, maybe people you've met in person. Do you feel at least that kind of momentum is growing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah, there's this guy, Joseph Perez Caputo in Connecticut. Love that guy. Same like me, you know, basically running his own ship, running on a minimal budget. I'm pretty sure he's paying for the majority of it himself. But he is just going to town in Connecticut. I think there are 4 guys right now in Connecticut, and their system is really messed up. Like they had a convention recently and none of them got on the ballot. And now they have just a very small window of time to get like thousands of signatures to petition themselves onto the ballot. And I'm like, that's not democracy. There are many examples of things like that throughout the states, right? Like, and so recently with this whole Louisiana versus Calais decision, right?
Yeah.
It just amplifies that sort of thing. It's like, oh, right. You guys are going all in on making this a feudal state.
Yeah. And they don't hide it anymore. They're very open about it, which I would hope would come back to bite them, because they're not trying to hide it. It's, we are purposefully redistricting to give white people more seats.
Well, the thing of it is, and this is the thing that nobody wants to talk about. This is the elephant in the room, right? The whole divide and conquer thing. And this is why I always tell people, I'm like, listen, all barrels should be aimed at the 1% right now, because the 99% of us down here, we are much more alike than we are different. So all this race war, race baiting, LGBTQ plus trans hating bullshit, at the end of the day, almost every single one of us is a paycheck away from losing our house, or can't feed our kids, or our education system is suffering, or, money's getting siphoned out to pay some hedge fund, or BlackRock's coming in and buying up properties to where you can't have the American dream. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But the poor white person has much more in common with that black person that they hate down the street because some other MFer told them to hate that person.
So is part of your goal, maybe going forward, bringing more people together, growing the base, I suppose? I don't want to make it too political, even if at the end of the day it's political change and partisan
politics. Well, life
politics,
is political, my friend. This is what I found out.
Well, it's for sure. But just as far as framing it, it's like trying to gather a whole bunch of people together to vote Democrat. Like, even if that's kind of the tangible, functional thing in a two-party system, beyond that, are you trying to bring, I guess, more communities together? Introduce people to each other who didn't know that the other person existed, kind of thing, right? And just, bring people more together with these common, needs for sure, and interests and values, right? I mean, that could be an interesting role going forward.
Well, I would see, look at you laughing already. It would be disingenuous of me to not be truthful. So this is what I will say.
Okay.
Truth makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? And my opinion is, I'm going to go off my notes here, but we need real people of the moment. And my opinion is we need people that are coming to run because they are called to, not because they are chosen to. Yeah. And so part of what I think my job is moving forward is I was outspoken on the trail, not because I was trying to be controversial, but because this movement is bigger than myself, right? Like, I was fighting for my kids, for the kids in the community, for the kids of this nation, for the kids of the world, sort of thing. And I think that gives a person a different perspective, right? So if the goal is to have these things, to force change, right? Well, then we need to be investing in our youth. So in the short term, I can throw my weight behind any other progressive candidate that's actually running, that actually got a nomination to run. Okay. My opinion is the Democratic Party doesn't necessarily need any help. Like, if they've picked an establishment candidate that they want and that they've thrown all their weight behind and all their money behind, then they should have a pretty successful chance at winning. So therefore, you don't necessarily need me. But the people that need me right now would be the people like I was, the people that don't really have a staff, that are trying to do things on their own, but that actually might have a real chance of winning if they got a little bit of help, right? Sure. And I would actually say anybody that's interested in any sort of guidance or help from me should reach out, because I haven't picked those people yet. But the only way, I hate to say it this way, you cannot convince me to be for you. You have to show me, right? If there is a candidate out there that shows me that I align with them And it would have to be on humanitarian issues, right? So I can't in good conscience stand behind anybody that can't say the word genocide, that can't talk about trans rights, that doesn't understand that if you're a humanist or a humanitarian, that is for everybody, right? So that means all or none. Mm-hmm. If I ever hear anybody say anything that gives me the impression that they would be willing to compromise that belief system, I can't get behind that, right? So that also means I can't vote for that person. So it's going to be tricky moving forward. I am not one. But one thing that I'm worried about with this party right now is this whole thought that vote blue no matter who because it doesn't matter and we just need to put them in those seats and then we'll figure it out. I'm like, well, how well has that been working for you? Because I just feel very strongly, right? Just like people are disengaged because you constantly go against their wishes. So if you want people to be engaged, provide them candidates that they can get behind, that speak to them, that are of them.
So if the Democrats generally across the country, I guess, feel like there's a wave coming their way, they're going to win anyway, that reduces, unfortunately, some of your leverage as far as like they need those bold candidates, right, to get more votes, which would be better. I mean, it comes back to, I don't know, there's some deep, deep structural, institutional things that have to change. You know, again, it's like the two-party system. What other options do you have? I always wonder, a lot of Canadians wonder, I think, like, why isn't there more, whether it's third-party like presidential candidates or maybe regional candidates, maybe in a handful of states that are like close together or something that form a bloc. And as much as it's still a party and all that, it's giving people options. It's giving them a choice. And surely there could be something that's like organized enough, has lots of funding, has some big names and familiar names and all that. And just says we're sick and tired of this black or white two-party left or right, you know, one or the other system, which is insane. I don't know if there's any other country that really does things that way, where it's such a stark choice. It's really just one or the other. And that's what they've played off of for, you know, generations now in the States. So, I mean, if there's anything that maybe should be organized, I suppose it's to do that and to give other options. And as much as people would say, well, yeah, it's just going to dilute the left vote, the blue vote or something, and it'll split and Republicans will walk right through the middle. Well, if you have the volume, right, then maybe you have enough votes. And I think part of it, regardless, is still to say this is how it works in, parliamentary countries, I guess, multi-party countries, is that you do have more coalitions. You have parties that have their stance. They have the things they believe in, their identity. It could go back again generations. But they know how to work with other parties of that similar perspective. And so you're more likely to work with those parties than someone on the really far on the other side of the aisle, of course. But they know that not one party is going to get all the power. They have to work together, and you can still have your base. You can have your clan if you want. You can have your identity, right? And get the votes that you get, right? And then knowing that, well, it's not all or nothing. You're not completely splitting the vote, but you have a chance to work together. Now, that would come back to changing the voting system, of course, too, which is another whole story. But at least if you organized, in theory, kind of hopefully like a third-party type alternative that's strong enough. People, I'm sure, haven't really voted for third-party candidates or parties, because like they're one-offs, right? They're random people and stuff, and it has to be a little more substantial than that. But I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not going to happen this year, I would think. But just going forward, but it does come back to like, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Of course, it's like, you know, what is it? Vote blue or nothing else. What's this? Vote slogan?
Blue no matter who.
Yeah. I mean, look, if it's a stark choice of one or the other, you're going to want blue more than MAGA Republicans, point blank, right? Surely you'd have to choose blue. You'd have to choose blue. And that plays into their hands, of course. But, like, what are you going to do? I don't know the answer. Canadians really wonder about this.
And I actually think that I'm the perfect person to answer this because I'm interested, because I spend a lot of time outside of the U.S., right? So I come with that perspective, and I've seen how it works on the other side. And as we say here, there are many ways to skin a cat. And funny that you mention a third party, because actually the Socialist Party is trying to get a candidate on the ticket for the Secretary of State's race in Indiana. Okay. And my understanding is if they get enough signatures and they get 2% of the vote, then the Socialist Party can become a state party. And then therefore candidates could run under the Socialist Party. So I know some of the organizers of this party, and now that I've kind of, seen a little bit more of how politics works, I think that the Democratic tent is too big.
Yeah.
I don't think they have any intention of working with the progressives or anything like that. In fact, they've basically villainized us. So meanwhile, while they're hemorrhaging people, it is a perfect opportunity for the Socialist Party to actually get some grounding. So I reached out to my friend the other day and I said, listen, you know what? I believe in what you're doing. I'll help you get signatures. I think that's actually a good way forward. Now, we're talking about the long game, right? Like none of this stuff is going to just be overnight. But these people that are partyless, essentially, that are being strong-armed into things, that's a problem. And it goes against a lot of people's principles. That's why Kamala Harris lost, essentially. Like, they haven't really released that audit yet. But from what I've been hearing, many of our Arabic neighbors here didn't vote for her because she couldn't take a strong stance against the genocide. And more and more Americans are on that train, right? Like, we're watching this genocide in 4K unfold. Now it's not just in Palestine, it's spreading to Lebanon and Syria. And, we've got it going on in Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo. And it is becoming very, very clear that Israel will not stop unless they are stopped. And I think Americans are tired of essentially being Israel's dummy. And they love to use our money, our power, our influence, or our bodies for their own agenda. And I think that is becoming very flagrant and abusive. And a lot of Americans did not see that sort of thing. And so the Democratic Party right now is white knuckling it. And I think it's going to blow up in their face. And a perfect example of that is you have certain big, like high dollar candidates that are already in office, like Alyssa Slotkin, for example, who a lot of people initially liked. And they're like, oh, like she seems very sound, good speaker.
Is she in Indiana?
She's in Michigan.
Yeah.
But the Indiana Democratic Party, they have a speaker every year at the convention for where the delegates pick the Secretary of State nominee.
Right.
And they invited her to be the speaker. And recently there's a lot of controversy over some things that she said. She's not alone in that. I'm not trying to just pick on her, but it's just an example. Where they're trying to spin this thing into anti-Semitism. Where they're yes, I took a shit ton of money from AIPAC and J Street and all of the rest. But the problem is not that. The problem is not, the genocide and the bombing of brown bodies and all of the rest. The problem is you. The problem is you within the Democratic Party. How dare you say anything against Israel? Because we need to continue to be their lapdogs and do their bidding because they are who bought us. They are who pays for our campaign. So therefore, you're an anti-Semite. Don't you say one word against the state of Israel, what they're doing, or any of these senators or congressmen or whatever, because how dare you?
So wait, who's saying that?
I'm greatly
Sure.
over.
But she was saying that?
I'm not using her language directly.
I see.
I've watched a couple talks that she gave, and that is my opinion of what was said.
Yeah.
But she is not alone in that. So that has pissed off a lot of people in the Indiana Democratic Party because we're like, hold on a second. So now you're sort of getting movement in this state and in this country to say, hey, stop sending our money to this war machine. We don't like this. And then you want to shove someone like that down our throat when we're supposed to be picking one of our, whoever we want to be the nominee for for our Secretary of State race.
Right. Well, who's to say that she's not the one that's tone deaf then, right?
I think it's money. She seems smart enough. She did like 3 tours in Iraq, I think. She was in the CIA. She's a smart woman. She knows exactly what she's doing.
Okay.
She's not stupid.
Well, okay, so she's probably just, of course,
and
trying
she's
to
not
play
alone.
The game. Yeah.
I'm not picking on Slotkin.
Right, but her and other these big name, high profile candidates, very ambitious, and if they've been told, and probably, I guess they agree, whatever, that if they want to play the game, if they want to get ahead, if they want to have that chance of, being a career senator or maybe on a presidential ticket, you got to play the game. You can't rock the boat. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you could say that, well, maybe it's a grassroots question. There has to be the grassroots that's pushing for things. There's always a grassroots that is a little left or right, that's a little more radical or a lot more, and, is pushing the borders. Whereas the people that are typically more the higher, more profile, there are exceptions. AOC, I guess, and people like her who may be growing. Mamdani, of course, is the other great example. But, there are the exceptions. Are they becoming more the rule? But generally, it's the grassroots that pushes the center and the leaders, and it should be the leadership in various shape and form to at least acknowledge that grassroots, because they still need that support. They still need those votes. And do they not have values and things that they believe in, right? I mean, maybe that's where things have bottomed out so much now, is that they just don't care, because it's such a stark choice that, hey, at the end of the day, either you vote blue or you go home, right? I mean, there's very little leverage, it seems, for progressive, or at least there has been. Maybe that's what's going to start changing.
I think it boils down to what kind of country do we want?
Yeah,
like
sure.
the American people, there are like 342 million of us. And we're spread out, and we're regional, and we have, different dialects, sometimes different languages, different cultural beliefs, religious backgrounds, all these types of things.
Yeah.
We recognize anybody that's other right now, that the rise of the white Christian nationalist movement does not benefit anyone. However, that being said, when you tell these people, when you've sort of radicalize them within the party too, right? Like to say, oh, beware of these white Christian nationalists, and they are all Republican and they're all bad, and you basically have to hate these people. At the same time that the Republicans are doing it on the other side, saying, oh, these liberals, they want to go and take your children and give them sex changes and, like all these horrible things. This is where you have to step back as a citizen, right? And think to yourself, okay, who is actually fueling the rage, and how do we stop it? And my answer 100% of the time is the money. So I think if we just always dial into who is actually our enemy and try and solve that problem. So when the Democratic Party tries to strangle the voices, trying to even draw attention to that, that should also make a person subjectively curious, at least, and be like, interesting. Well, like, I know some Republicans, me and others, right? Like, I know some Republicans in my family that, I don't agree with them, but I can also recognize that they were radicalized by Fox News. And if you cut the stream to Fox News, and maybe, if they'll do it, ask them to take a break, right? And just say, hey, go off of social media and, cable, whatever, for like a week, and then come back to me after you've interacted with some people in your community, and then let's have a conversation and see how radical you are today.
Maybe that's the answer.
You see how much of a machine it is, and you see how propagandized the American public is. So grassroots is the only option. And if that means that you have to buck the system a bit, however that looks for you, like I always tell people, right, vote your conscience. Not that I don't really see myself as a politician, right? But like I was a candidate. My job as a candidate was to present to you who I am, what I stand for, and hopefully you will get enough of that to determine what kind of person I am morally to put in that position to advocate for you. And if you can't be certain of what type of person you are sending to a congressional seat or a House seat or whatever to advocate for you, that is your first problem. So we have to use our leverage or what have you to try and bring those people to the surface and get as many of them activated and in those positions as possible. And that may mean bucking the political party that you're a part of, because if at the end of the day your goal is to make the states a better place, a more livable place, a more fair place for everyone, then you're going to have to step in that uncomfortability and make hard decisions, which will make you unpopular.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the nature of both of our countries is that, there's such an amalgam of different backgrounds, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, every country, I suppose you could say, but really we have to learn how to work together. It's not one side that's going to be able to dominate, because there's always going to be other views.
But you can't force them. You know what I mean?
Force it. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And I've loved what I've seen in Canada, right? Mm. Like, you guys have shown us some serious background, because you're like, oh, right. Yeah, fuck you and your, American whiskey. We're just not going to drink it. And I think everybody in the States was like, what? What do you mean you're not going to buy Jack Daniels? And you guys are like, no, fuck it. Throw it in the trash. And I was like, yeah. And that is the sort of solidarity that we need to see in the States. And right. I think we have examples like you guys. I'm not saying they're perfect examples, but along the way.
In the past.
Yeah, along the way.
The country wouldn't exist
like
still
that.
if it hadn't worked in the past. I think that's a key point. And that's,
Exactly.
Obviously social media and Fox and stuff for the last 25 plus years. But how the hell did this country survive for 150, 70 years, right? When you always had people of different backgrounds and races and then religion and all the rest. Somehow it not only succeeded, but it thrived. It became the most dominant country in the world. Like, that doesn't happen by accident. People have to be able to live together, compromise, and get along for a greater good. Now, that's founded in a lot of myths and, structural beliefs and so on. But, I mean, that's probably still there underneath it all the slogans we hear about liberty and freedom for everyone and all this kind of stuff, which all just feels like lip service these days. But, like, it was... I think there's always a bit of truth to those stereotypes, because people fundamentally are taking actions and making decisions based along those things, whether they're politicians in Congress making decisions, voters going to vote, people every day in their communities doing things. And underneath it all, I think, is the fact, yes, we live in this free democratic country, right? That's what guides us, because imagine what the alternative is, when we're starting to see, of course, now that, when you live in an autocratic country or worse, and you have to be careful what you say and who you talk to and who's watching you. Like, we've heard stories of the Soviet Union and stuff like that.
Sure.
Right. And so these are the common bonds. And I mean, it's a silo effect, right? People don't talk to each other. That's why I'm really interested in if you can be in a position of bringing people together from different perspectives and finding that common ground. We could do it here in the podcast. I mean, talk to some Republicans, really. And they're not like former Republicans, but that was an interesting one, but like people who are actually Republicans, because this is how democracy works. It's not a one-party system. That's not a democracy. It's an autocracy or worse. A democracy has to have, well, at least two, ideally multiple parties where people have different views and all that, and they come together and they compromise. It's the only way it can work. So, therefore, you have to be willing to work with the other side. You have a disagreement, you figure it out, you shake hands, you go to the bar afterwards, and, that's how democracy it was. The Senate was known as, like, what was it, the world's greatest collegial club or something like that, which of course was a bunch of old white men, but still, at least they were able to get along and like get things done. That never happens anymore. Like, they don't work together. Nobody does. You have to do this to have a functioning democracy. That's something that can start at the grassroots. I
have a lot of opinions.
I
will say this. I know. I will say this, right? I had put in my application for the Daughters of the American Revolution. There is also a Sons of the American Revolution that, people that can prove ancestry from a participant, from a soldier that was active in the American Revolution, you can be a part of. It's a lengthy process, takes a long time to gather all your paperwork. You have to prove like birth, death, marriage records, all the way back. I did that because my niece was asking me about our heritage. And I knew that we'd been here for a long time, but once you get to digging, especially through records like that, you discover some things. This country has always been very diverse, and they've always had people fighting. I I think, and the reason I share this story is this. There are some African American people or Black people, however they choose to identify, that have been in this country, like my friend Bree Woodson's family, since like the 1600s.
Wow.
And when you have people who are white Christian nationalists that will say stupid shit, like, this is a great white nation and we've always been a Christian nation. And, you know, like my friend Sierra always says, there were Muslims that you shipped over here who were Black, who helped built this country, right? Mm-hmm. Same with Two-Spirit people. There have always been trans. It might have been a different name, but there were several indigenous tribes here that accepted that, and it was different. Mm-hmm. All of these people need to be called out on their bullshit,
Yeah.
We can start there, and I think that was probably maybe what made the Senate work way back when, because I do think they were more educated about these types of things. But it is always the money, right? Like, we have this resurgence of the robber barons, and it has infected our politics. It has infected the highest court in our land. And we sort of have to cut the head off the snake. And you have people from areas like mine that have been here in some shape or form also since like the 1600s. We've got, you know, Camp Wiatnon, that was a French settlement. A lot of people don't know that the French were here before the British.
Yeah, that's right.
And they actually, if your family is old enough, there is a very specific reason why some Americans have a bad taste in their mouth for the British even today. And it's because of things like that. My family is one of them.
Yeah.
I always used to hear stories like, you know, like the French weren't as bad as the English because at least the French are intermarried. I'm not saying that they weren't bad or they didn't do bad things, but it was the British that came in here and exterminated people. And we essentially have kept that system, this system of like oppression, repression, whatever. And you're just seeing that everywhere, whether it's women's rights, reproductive rights, gay rights, Black rights, voting rights.
Right.
The root is the
present.
same.
Yeah.
The root's the same. It's colonialism, imperialism. You know, patriarchy is an extension of that shit. So if we can't have these real conversations, and it starts within our parties, right? Like, if those of us that disagree within the Democratic Party can't speak truth to power and hold them accountable and say, listen, I understand what you're trying to do here, but I respectfully disagree. And if they can't have that conversation with us, if they try and repress us, what makes you any different than a monarchy or an authoritarian sort of government?
Well, that's just it. I mean, logically, in a democracy, the response to that eventually would be that, well, screw it, we're going to go start our own party. That's how parliamentary democracies at least worked in the past. Now, you know, it takes a lot of work and, of course, money and organization to do so. But that's why I feel like, is it really the system? There's nothing, of course, in the Constitution that says it's a two-party system, right? Yeah. That's all just been made up. So there's nothing that's fundamentally stopping that from happening. It's got to be willpower. There's got to be more than enough money and more than enough people, even if it's regionally concentrated, right? But to have third-party options, whatever they are. So, I mean, that's interesting. But it comes back to, you know, there's always been, it's such a fascinating country because it's like the combination of this push and pull, the yin and yang of going back and forth between, you know, outright racism and oppression and so on. And at the same time, these ideals of democracy and liberty and free speech enshrined in the Constitution, right, pushing against each other. And underneath that, you have this massive, physically, geographically massive, large country that before long, you know, growing in population, which meant tons of wealth, access to all kinds of resources. Then you build your military. Then you win a couple world wars. You know, there's a lot at stake here. I mean, other countries might have that. Canada, to some extent, Australia, I don't know, places that are smaller, but at a much smaller scale. Here you have the United States, with, you know, these days over 300 million people, right? It's 10 times the size of Canada. There's so much at stake just because there's so much. There's That's why the stakes feel so high. But you wouldn't be at the point you're at right now if there hadn't been a lot of that compromise. Mm-hmm. If they had let it be some Christian white nationalist state from the beginning, right, and an autocracy, an oligarchy, mm-hmm. and all that mm-hmm. kind of stuff, if that had just kind of run its course, you never would have achieved the things you achieved because it falls apart. Maybe that's what's going to happen. I mean, there's no guarantee that things are going to last.
You know, I also want to talk a little bit about our indigenous history because I think there's an important root to that as well. Like a lot of people don't realize that our Constitution, the framework was based upon the Iroquois Confederacy, right? The Haudenosaunee tribes.
Right.
And that's significant, right? Like same with women's rights, the suffrage movement.
Yeah,
like,
of course. Yeah.
Those white women didn't start that because they were like, oh, hey, this sounds like it will be fun. They watched their indigenous neighbors. They watched those women, those matriarchies who had power. And they watched how that was structured and how it worked. And they were like, wow, if they can do that, we can replicate that. Mm-hmm. So we have to, in this country, have a deeper conversation about truth, history, and politics. And how the current political system was structured to benefit white men, white landowners.
Yeah.
And from the inception, it has been purposeful to limit the power, wealth of everyone else.
Yeah.
For people that would argue and say, oh, well, not all men are bad, not all white men are bad, blah, blah. That's not what the issue is per se, but that is the start of the issue, right? Like you have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Same with the Epstein files, for example, right? Like, at present, not one person has been held accountable. There are several different examples, like, within the U.S., of just normal people who have done these heinous acts and have gotten away with things. Just regular people. So if we can't even handle that, and if we have women making mistakes for that kind of bad behavior and all that sort of thing, how are we ever going to come together in a fashion to where we can actually do something about the people, not just the perpetrators within the Epstein files, but to structurally change things that prevent us from giving these survivors the justice that they deserve and putting these people behind bars. But whatever that looks like. But all roads lead to money. Every single road in this country leads to money. And that is why I feel it doesn't matter what political party you're a part of at this point. The one benefit of Trump, really, was he exposed all of this. Like he exposed it in such a way that it was irrefutable. And now it's just a matter of
trying to hide it anymore.
Exactly. Now it's just a matter of picking sides, right? It's like, hey, are you a racist? Are you bigot? Or are you not? And what kind of country do you want? How, like, is this hill worth dying on? Do you feel so strongly that you want to put women back in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant or whatever, that you're willing to pick up a rifle for it? Like, I think that's where this is heading. And everybody that's paying attention knows that. Like, we know that if we don't pick strong enough candidates that represent the people, like, this is not just the U.S. This is worldwide. You can only suppress and oppress a people for so long before they revolt. I mean, look at the 1789 French Revolution. Like, we are well on track for something else to change.
Yeah, that's a big question, a big statement. But, I mean, it's true. It could happen. We can't assume that it won't happen. Obviously, we want to do our best to avoid that happening, getting to that point. You know, before it's too late. I'm at the point where, you know, I think I finally recognized that you just can't assume anything anymore. You can't assume that the norms and the structures and even the society that we thought we had and maybe worked for whatever, a few decades or something, that it's going to survive, that it's still going to be there, that, you know, things aren't, you can't assume that things, frankly, are not going to get worse. Because here's another point, you know, it's like, well, if the next election, if it's fair, if there's enough of a blue wave and so on, they'll throw the bombs out and maybe things will start to change. Yeah, but even if that happens, they're not going to go quietly. I'm sure part of their whole state. I'll give Republicans, MAGA, credit for one thing, which is they're incredibly well organized. They know what they're doing. They've been doing this. They've been planning this for whatever 15 plus years, right? This isn't just kind of a last minute. Oh, what are we going to do now? Like they know what they're doing. So part of that planning could be very, potential scenarios where if somehow they actually lost an election and despite all their gerrymandering and everything else, they were not able to maintain power, well, they're going to have some strategy for getting it back, whether that's in 2 years or, 2 years after that, whatever it is. So you can't assume anything that people are just going to accept these fundamental bottom line things, because what are they in it for? I mean, it's the wealthy elite oligarchs who obviously are in it for themselves. And then, as you say, everyone as an individual has to ask what kind of country they want. But here's where it comes back to that outreach, because I'm interested in your perspective on this, is like, how do you break through to, I know it's easy to label Republicans, but really anybody who, is trying to see a different way. How do you get them and to then let go? Because I'm sure a reason why so many people continue to vote, MAGA, Republican, whatever. I mean, there are people who say, well, I'm embarrassed to admit that I made a mistake, right? And they don't want to acknowledge it, which is a cop-out. But still, how do you help people say, look, in a sense, I forgive you, but you need to do the right thing now and stop voting that way, for starters, and be a better person, a better citizen. And I'm here to help you do that, right? But, you have to take responsibility for your action, but I'm not going to hold it over your head, because it's the only way you move forward. If people are backed into a corner, then a lot of people are going to resist. They're going to push back and dig even deeper, And so it's the human psychology. So you have to extend that olive branch, but it's not a free olive branch. They have to take responsibility. But I feel like I'd be interested to see if you're interested in doing this, but, playing that role of help bridging that divide, because as much as there's all the structural, institutional stuff, which of course is valid, but is massive change, it may never change. How do you still try to work within the system and also do something that's more immediate? I think it's reaching out and bringing the sides together, Sure, trying to get them to switch off Fox News, for sure. But just in general, the whole thing about your neighbor's not your enemy, the person who's a different ethnicity or religion, etc., is not your enemy. You have far more in common than you don't. And so let's just talk to each other again. And we need people to play that role, bringing people together.
Well, I would love to say yes. However, the realistic part of my brain is saying, based upon history and what I've seen, I wonder if we're not too far gone and we just need to fight it out. Now, the question is more so, does there have to be bloodshed? Which that is what I'm actively trying to prevent. Like, that is why I ran, right? Is I'm like, hey, words are softer than bullets, so let's not go there. And we don't have to agree on a lot of things, but we do have to have some core values. And I do think there's a conversation to be had there. I think it's so volatile right now. I'm not sure that the American public can have it. But one thing that we could do is I think on all sides, just regular humans, regular people, whether or not you identify as an American right now is not necessarily important, but we could gain some favor that way by having that human conversation and say, hey, look at the Ro Khanna Massey situation, right? Like, hey, we all hate pedophiles. Like, we don't like this, and this is bad. This is not just bad, but it's bad for business, right? Like, do we want to be that country? Like, this was more so imposed upon us. Like, even though, yes, the argument can be had, we were doing this sort of thing for generations with the indigenous community, slavery. Yes to all of those things. Yes, there have to be hard conversations about all those things. But can we pick a few main focal points to have that conversation, to rally the American public? What I think the political parties are doing right now is further polarizing people. They're making people angrier, and they're making people angrier within their base. And you are correct in that. I think the American public in general is a very surly bunch. And a lot of that, yeah, a lot of it comes from our history, right? Like, we're always fighting. I just told my mom the other day, I said, like, Americans we're a violent bunch. And she's like, well, what do you mean by that? I was like, look at our history. I was like, maybe we don't want to be, but that is our history. Like, we've had to fight for everything. And it doesn't matter whether it's like human rights, LGBTQ plus rights, reproductive rights, women's rights, disability rights. Like, we're always having to fight. And if we're going to fight, well, then let's figure out who we fight. And I think that is sort of the next battle in the U.S., right? Like, whether it is flock cameras and the extra surveillance, or wanting to invest in Israeli tech and allow them to have, set up international bases in places like Indiana. Like, I think the responsibility of the American public moving forward is to call all of that out, like to call it out for what it is. And if that means that you are a Republican and you don't like what your Republican governor is doing, for example, then that means that responsibility also falls on you to say, hey, buddy, you know what? This isn't what I voted for. Like, I agree with 99% of the other things that you're doing, but not this one. And I think that will be the challenge moving forward, because to convince people in this big of a place to be able to get on board with multiple issues is going to be difficult. And that's why, going back to the notes, right? Let's say those again. The three main issues that Americans can get behind right now, that they are saying they can get behind right now, are genocide and foreign wars, money and politics, and the Epstein files. So if you are against those things, if you think that the Epstein files are okay, we should be bombing the shit out of Iran, and genocide is awesome, well, then you're going to have to pick a team. Like, just, are you on the side of humanity or are you not? And if you're not on the side of humanity, I can't help you. But if you are, or if you're thinking about it, then there's probably a seat for you at the table somewhere.
Right. And I guess part of that, a big part, is the notion that that table is not a single table. It's not just a table for progressives or liberals or Democrats. There's also a table for Republicans. We need better Republicans. It's really what it comes down to, amongst other things. But you need to have better parties. You need a better opposition, right? That's how you have a healthy democracy. If you have one party that's just so radicalized, then, it doesn't accomplish anything. Nobody wants to work with them, and if they actually get in power, they're going to destroy the place. You have to have better Republicans. So when you're talking to people, it's like, we're not trying to convince you to, like, switch parties and all this. I mean, if you want to, okay, but that's not the point. It's be a better, assuming they're Republican, be a better Republican, be a better right-wing conservative or something, but have those fun.
I'm giggling over here because I have a perfect example for this. And I use it all the time because I talk to a lot of dudes, and I'm from a very working class area, and I may use abrasive language sometimes because I find it's effective, especially with the guys. So my example is this. You don't have to be gay. This is not the conversation, right? We're just saying you don't have to prevent a person from being themselves. Nobody's asking you to do it. And that's what I remember the Republican Party, from what I was told, was about, right? It's about small government, stay out of people's bedrooms, mind your business. Like, we don't want to be paying for XYZ. And then along the way, they've done all those things, right? They're like, well, I never thought I would hear in a million years a Republican administration, like it's full of Republicans, start to have conversations about the Second Amendment. I never thought I would see that in my lifetime, because these are the NRA people, right? Like, these are the people that are like, no, don't you dare. If I want to sit on a mountain of, like, semi-automatic weapons, like, that is my God-given and American right. So I think that the Democratic Party is missing every opportunity to bring these people to the table and say, listen, all we're saying is, like, hey, let's put some safety locks on them, and, like, don't keep your Uzi around your 5-year-old. It's just not great. Like, it's not a good move. Like, We can have that conversation about green energy with a farmer if you say, hey, I'm not saying every farm around here has to have solar panels, right? And we all don't like data centers, and it's a shitty deal. So if we have to have them, let's put them in like smack dab in Indianapolis in the richest neighborhood we can find. And then we can have that conversation with people, right? Because they'll be like, hell yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think you can approach people when you make it fair, and equitable, and say, the rich people have been exploiting us for time immemorial, and this vote is your opportunity to change that. And so therefore it falls upon the candidates, and I won't just pick on the party here, right? The candidates have an opportunity to step out of the box now that they've gotten these nominations and force change. They are now the nominees of this party. They can make a change, and they can make a stance, even if that means that they may piss people off and break, party establishment rules. If any of these people started to say things like, I know the party doesn't want me to say genocide, but I'm going to say it because everybody that I talk to in my district says, hey, fuck this genocide. It's bullshit. Like, why do we keep sending money to Israel whenever we can't have free universal health care and we can't have free higher education? Like, you guys are out of excuses. So if you can push the line, and if the progressive mindset is not just democratic, but is American, saying, we want these things, we demand these things, you guys work for us, you will give them to us or else. Like, that needs to be the conversation that is being had. Not, you guys have all the power. Like, you can't have these very small amount of people that have all the power. You have to convince the American citizen again that they are the ones with the power. There are 342 million of us, and if they don't do what they're told, then we're going to have to do something about that.
Keep up with that message.
I know. We'll see. We'll see what we can do.
It's exciting, though. I mean, this is bring it back to where we started. It's a big change, of course, in your life. I'm very interested to see where you go from here and everything you've learned. And
would you like to see me run again as a Canadian?
Well, sure, of course.
No, I mean, seriously, like, you guys have to be very interested in what's going on down here. What kind of candidate would you like to see from a Canadian perspective?
Well, I would like a candidate, and I will be nonpartisan here, frankly, left or right, blue or red, who is, frankly, willing to work together. It's really as simple as that, which sounds, I mean, that's what we did. How the hell did we get NAFTA in the first place if people weren't willing to work together? Which means, we give a bit, you give a bit, we find some common ground, everybody wins. That's how it was. That's how it's supposed to be. It was only this one idiot who's come along and screws everything up, right? And obviously he has his supporters, but like, it's we're looking for people that want to work together, and we can come from different backgrounds for sure, but yeah, I think that's it. And that's kind of, maybe you could say on more of a tangible economic type level, and eventually treaties and stuff like that. But there's also the moral side. There's the psychological side. Canadians do not feel welcome in the States. I mean, we're not going partly because of a boycott, just a flat out boycott. I'm not spending any money in the States, and I'm afraid. I have nothing to be afraid of. I am afraid. I don't want to cross the border. I don't want them asking questions. I don't want them looking at my phone or any of that kind of stuff. Why the hell would I go through that unless I really had to, right? So that has to change. Things have to feel more welcoming and and rational. Of course, there's borders and security and stuff like that. But if it was fine for all of those years or decades, and it changes on a dime like this, like that doesn't make any sense. In theory, at least, it could change back, and you have to have the people that are the leaders that are setting that tone. So that's what Canadians, I know, are looking for, is like, we just want to feel that we have a partner again, we don't really have time for this, and I'd love to come back and talk more about Canadian perspective. Not that I speak for all Canadians, but I mean, we do think about it a lot here. We could do another episode on just Canadian perspective on things. But the big thing I do know that Canadians have learned over the last year and a half almost is it was a wake-up call. It was almost a punch in the face in that we realized, especially for the last 30 or so years, 35 years, that we have been far, far, far too intertwined with the United States. We've been dependent, certainly militarily, defense, obviously economic, culturally too. It didn't used to be that way. Canada was a very, very distinct country and culture, and there was a very firm, at least trade economic border between Canada and the United States until they brought in free trade in 1988. Which was a massive, massive deal here. I know it was in some parts of the states, especially border states, but in Canada, there was a whole election over it. There was a big, big national debate. If we bring in free trade, it's going to change everything in our country. We're not going to trade east-west. We're going to trade more north-south and break bonds that we used to have between, like, the United Kingdom and even Europe and stuff, and there was lots of logical argument. Why would you ship things and have tariffs, because that's what it was then, there were tariffs, between Canada and the States to make it easier to trade between Canada and Britain? And it's on the other side of the ocean, for God's sake. We should just be trading between neighbors. It's a 2-hour drive instead of a 10-day boat trip or something. There was a lot of logical arguments to it, but what happened is it became so dependent and so intertwined that when shit like this happens now and you have a lunatic in charge, now we're in trouble, and it's a real wake-up call. So that's not going back. We are not going to be as intertwined again unless, unless we make poor decisions, let's say. But our eyes are wide open now. So the government's saying, well, we try to have treaties with different places, with the European Union, of course, and Japan, and even China, and so on. We have to do as much as we can. Now, you still have to acknowledge the fact there's the whole saying that Pierre Trudeau came up with, I think, back in the 60s. It was Canada's like sleeping next to the elephant, something like that. When the elephant moves, then we feel it, We can't avoid that. It's geography. It's nature of where we live and who we are. But we sure as hell can be much more careful and protective and not so naive. I think that's the big thing. It was a very, very naive thing. Well, of course, Americans are our friends. We can always trust them. They're our best friends, We don't feel that way anymore. It's sad. I hope we get some of that back.
Well, I really appreciate that perspective because, like I said, I've got many friends all over the globe, and that was what made me nervous right away. And, I mean, we've had this conversation. I flat out told you, I was like, don't come here. And you're like, what do you mean? And I was like, it's dangerous, and it's going to get more dangerous. And I didn't want my friends to be put in that type of situation. And I mean, it happened very rapidly, right? Like there was that Canadian actress that got locked up with ICE, and there's all these types of stories, and just I would love. But see, I took the abolishing ICE pledge because I saw all that crap, and I was like, this is bad. It doesn't work for anyone. Like the private prison system in this country sucks. Like nobody's benefiting from that, and now we've got like our whole. People would disagree on this, right? But like we've got a whole host of concentration camps right now. And I'm like, nothing about this smells like freedom. Like something that smells like freedom is like having Canadian hikers come down from Canada and hike the trail, like hike the Pacific North Trail. Like we don't put barbed wire up and fences for that. This was an agreement that we had amongst nations. So I feel like it's important that you said all that. I think we need legislators that will be open-minded to that. Right now we have this still imperialist sort of thought of like, Americans can go to Mexico and go to a gated community and eat all the tacos and chips and salsa that we want while not giving a shit about the Mexicans. And it's like, no, that kind of shit needs to stop. Like we need to be more worldly in our viewpoint of people and places and things and cultures. And that's why I ramble on about colonialism and imperialism, because I'm like, everywhere you look, it's that sort of thing of like, we're the Americans and we're here and we're great. And that kind of shit has to stop. Because if we don't stop it, right, it's like the spoiled kid in the room, right? It's like, I'm not quite sure what you need to do to this kid, but they need some significant punishment to be able to play with the rest of the kids in the sandbox at this point. Like, we can't just keep running around the world and be like, hey, we're great and everything we do is great. And meanwhile, we're like multi-generational destruction in our wake. Like, we need people that will talk about these things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm glad you're part of that conversation. That's for sure.
Well, I don't think I'll be doing anything but amplifying all the things that I'm saying because I'm well pissed. And, I've stayed here this long. My family's been here this long. And I'm just like, I guess you're going to have to fight me for it. Like, I don't want to fight. But, if that's where this is going, Well, no, we're not just going to roll over and take it.
Right. And that's, I think, a fundamental point in all this. The nature of the country, as we were talking about, that, there's all kinds of different people, and everyone is an American, everyone is a citizen, right? And, like, they have an equal stake to the future and the outcome and the structure of the country and society as everybody else does. And all you hear about is the white oligarchs, multi-billionaires, and as if they're the only ones who get to decide, which obviously is bullshit, but everybody has to take that power. You are citizens. This is not an autocracy yet. Everyone has a role in playing, and that's always been the case for 200 years, right? As I say, people have had to fight for it. But it's starting with that fundamental acknowledgement that you have as much of a right to determine the outcome here and have your rights and access to voting and, and everything else, and recognition, equal rights. It's not just something that's kind of a favor that's passed down. Oh, we'll give you a little bit of this. Like, no, it's your country. You've earned it. You deserve it. If that's what people want, and I think they do. So people do have to push for it and fight for it when they have to in different ways.
Yeah. So I guess we can wrap it up essentially by saying this: if something is worth fighting for, do it. Right? Yeah. Like, find your way to advocate for your things. Don't just take it on the chin or take it laying down. Don't think that you can do nothing. There's always something that can be done. But make sure that whatever you're doing, you feel good about, and you feel like you're contributing positively to something. And don't ever let someone force you into something you don't want to do. Like we say, many ways to skin a cat. Americans are multicultural and multicolor for a reason,
country.
And we always have been. We are like Dolly Parton's coat of many colors, and we should remain that way. There is not anything, nor has there ever been anything purely white about this nation.
Right. That's it.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking to you, Ted. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
We'll do it again.
Yeah. Let's do it again some other time.
We are at a pivotal point in American history. We do not have the luxury to remain silent. Programs are disappearing every day. We hope that this podcast raises awareness and sparks a sense of advocacy in you. We all can make a difference. The important thing is to start. See you next time.